Our gospel reading for this morning comes from Luke, and it has pretty strong connections to the Old Testament reading. If we had continued a little longer in the reading from 1 Kings, we would have heard of Elijah raising from the dead that widow's son, her only son. And now we'll hear a strikingly similar story that happens with Jesus. Let us listen for what the Spirit is speaking to us this day. Soon afterwards, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went with him. As he approached the gate of the town, a man who had died was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. And with her was a large crowd from the town. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came forward and touched the bier, which he should not have done. It would have made him unclean. And the bearers stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, rise." The dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized all of them, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has risen among us, and God has looked favorably on his people." This word about him spread throughout Judea and all the surrounding country. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. What is God like? That may be the most fundamental question that anyone can ask. What does it mean to be human? Maybe a close second. But as a religious person, I assume that human life is related to God. And so I can't really answer questions about what being human is like without first knowing something about the God who created us and has a purpose for us. I can't really say how life is related to God without first knowing what God is like. It's an ancient question, a question that most all religions seek to wrestle with. But with God being so much bigger, so far beyond our comprehension, very often we tend to picture God as like us in some way. Very often images for God take the things about humans that we admire or that impress us, and then simply magnify and multiply them many times over. You know, we humans tend to be impressed with power and might, with people who can get what they want, who can shape their own destiny, who can bend others to their will. And by comparison, we make fun of people who are weak. Politicians love to label their opponents as weak. Weak on crime, weak on defense, weak on terror, and so on and so on. No worse label could be attached to a president or to someone running for that office. Surely we don't want the leader of our strong and powerful country to be weak. And so it's hardly surprising that many images of God hone in on pictures of power and might, only magnified many times. God as a powerful divine warrior hurling lightning bolts is a popular one, and not just for Christians. Greek mythology had Zeus, the head god, with his arsenal of lightning bolts, and the Norse god Thor was similarly armed. And we like to use other human symbols of power and prestige with God. God as king, for example. Now, such images are in the Bible. God is an awesome, powerful deity, beyond measure powerful, more than able to whoop anybody who thinks otherwise powerful. Divine warrior king. Except that that's only one of many images of God that you can find in the Bible. We also have God as potter, God as shepherd, God as father, God as husband, God as broken-hearted lover, God as defender of the poor and the oppressed, and even God is love. And so, which of these images do you go to? Do you use when you seek to answer the question, what is God like? Now, if I was going to start a religion from scratch, this is one of the first issues I would take care of. I would want to make sure I was very clear on exactly what my God was like, so there would be no confusion. That's how I would do it. But the God we meet in the Bible does nothing of the sort. Instead of a nice, neat list of God's traits and characteristics, we get hundreds and hundreds of pages of stories and songs and letters where people of faith encounter God in their everyday lives and in the events of history. And such pictures of God do not lend themselves to a simple, neat, easy picture of God that you can slip into your wallet or place in your purse. And so a lot of people prefer to simply choose an image of God that suits them. You've heard it said that you can justify just about anything using the Bible, which is true if you carefully choose only certain passages. And a lot of people find an image of God that they like using a very similar process. And so not only do we have the powerful warrior God, but some people even have a powerful sword-wielding warrior Jesus. I ran across a quote the other day from a pastor, a fellow named Mark Driscoll. And this is what he said. He said, in Revelation, Jesus is a prize fighter with a tattoo down his leg and a sword in his hand and a commitment to make someone bleed. This is the guy I can worship. I cannot worship the hippie, diaper, halo Christ because I can't worship anybody that I can beat up. I checked Revelation. Jesus does have a sword in Revelation, but it's not in his hand. It's in his mouth. The only weapon Jesus has in Revelation is his words. And the primary image, the primary picture of Jesus in Revelation is that of a lamb that has been slain. And if I ever meet Pastor Driscoll, I'd really like to ask him, do you think your picture of Jesus is a true picture of Jesus? Or is it just what you want Jesus to be like? We get a picture painted for us by Luke today, a picture of Jesus found in the story we hear in the gospel. As Jesus travels along, he comes into a town called Nain. And there he encounters a funeral procession. And it is the funeral of a widow's only son. And that's not a stray piece of information. That's critical for understanding what happens. In Jesus' day, women had little legal standing. And a woman without a man was very vulnerable, without a male to provide for her, to protect her. And so a widow who had no male children was in great danger of quickly finding herself destitute.